All right, we are live. Lilian, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely, man. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so why don't we just start with just like a brief um, snapshot of just who you are and what you're working on right now.
Sure, yeah. I'm a copywriter, social media strategist, and publicist. I've been doing this for about 13 years now, and I've worked with just a ton of great people in like indie film and television, food and beverage, tourism and hospitality, a little bit of tech and sports and fitness in there as well. And currently, I'm actually um, gearing up for projects in the new year, a couple of film campaigns coming up, hopefully, and also working on actually helping to build out an audience engagement platform that I'm actually co-founder of that we're hoping to help filmmakers control their marketing and have a ready audience ready for them to, like, when they're ready to release a film or they're looking at like getting distributors on board, we can have that platform as part of their marketing strategy. So that's kind of quick glimpse of what I've been up to in the last 4 months and
Or-
change, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and to give context to anyone who is either going to listen or watch this
Mhm.
on YouTube, that we got connected originally from the Punch Beer in the Face event that
Yeah.
took place over the summer. And I believe we weren't in the same event, right? You, I think, were on the very first Punch Beer in the Face event as a speaker.
Actually, I was on the second one, and I believe you were the final speaker, I remember.
Okay, so it was
And
the same one. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
awesome. And so we both uh, punched beer in the face that day,
Yeah.
and spoke a little bit about, for anyone who didn't know what that event was basically encouraging um, mostly entrepreneurs or people that are looking to start businesses to share their ideas with strangers and other people that are going through that journey. And so I thought it was I really enjoyed your talk and everything that you spoke about. And I mean, we're both in the marketing realm and speak the same language, so I thought it would be fun for us to connect and just peel away some layers related to marketing and all the things that you listed that you're currently working on. So just to give some context there, that's how we're connected. And thanks so much for coming again on the podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure, and it's always good to kind of have those kinds of discussions and help people demystify the whole thing and kind of what why it's important and the types of things they could do. It's always good to have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, and I find that one challenge, and I think we spoke about this briefly in another conversation that we had, was the amount of time as a marketer that you spend explaining
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing and why you're doing it to people that you are either serving as a client or internally if you're part of just like an organization, whether that's other marketers or just other people within the organization. Um, is that has that been your experience?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why, like, from a strategic standpoint, I try to have those conversations with clients right off the bat, and I try to prepare them, for the amount of work that's ahead, the amount of input that I'm going to need from them, because I've always been very clear in the sense that I am the third party coming in to help you build this, but I can't do it without your input. Nothing happens without your input. I don't release anything. I don't publicize anything. Everything needs to kind of go through your eyes to make sure it's okay first, right? And yet still, I've had, even just very recently, had a client say, this was for a publicity campaign, that until we got into the trenches together, she had no idea exactly how much work she would actually need to do and the amount of thinking and the amount of brainstorming, because she didn't do anything of that like any of that prior to coming to me, right? And that's kind of the thing that I find a lot in my line of work is you do the best that you can to prepare people for what's in store for them. But a lot of times until you get into the trenches, they don't have any idea. And the best that I can do is say that, I've tried to really emphasize to you that it needs this much work from you, because I can only, like if we're working on publicity, I can only publicize what you've chosen to publicize, right? Like I can give you my input and my 2 cents on massaging a story idea, but what that idea is has to come from you. I don't have that knowledge because, again, I'm that third party person coming in here trying to help you create that strategy, but you're the one who knows your business best. You're the one who knows your stories best and what your goals are. I can help you reach them. I can give you my 2 cents on how to refine things, but the base idea has to come from you. And if you haven't done any thinking, about those ideas and everything, until I come into the picture, well, it's going to take longer, and there's only so much that I can do to kind of help nudge you and to get you there, right? To pull out details that might be great to use in a pitch or might be great to use in a social media campaign. There's only so much I can do because it's all up here for the client. And it's my job to try and get them to put it on paper at least.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's where it can be tricky because I think if someone wants to bring on, say, a marketer to help market their business, they just want to hand it over to you,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't. Maybe they have ideas in their head, but they don't, know how to execute or get it on to not even necessarily paper, but on a website or whatever. And so I think it's collaborative. I think the short and sweet of it is that it's very collaborative. It's not just passing the puck on to the marketer to make, to pull a rabbit out of a hat. I think you need to be able to collaborate and work together on the finished product. And even when it comes to like I've been like in marketing and communications, and I've been a marketing and communications manager, and it depends on the workplace and who you report to on how much you have the final say, because different styles of bosses or CEOs or whoever it is that you report to, you still might have to filter or get their okay. Even though you might be at the top of the ladder, it might still go to, in your field, it still might need to go to someone else, not all the time, but on maybe some projects. So I think it's really important to highlight that it is marketing's very collaborative and not just passing the puck.
And it's also, I've worked in situations like for marketing agencies and PR agencies, right? So the entire agency is the third party coming into a company and trying to help them develop a strategy. Well, it's like you could spend so much time and energy trying to chase down the key decision makers to make a decision on, like, for example, if you're doing a monthly PR campaign, what that looks like, what the stories are, who we can interview and schedule and everything. And if they don't get back to you, the frustrating part as a marketer is, like, at the end of the month, you've spent however many weeks trying to chase them down, and then it's like they ask you why you didn't do anything. And it's like, well, we're not about to act unilaterally here. This is your business, your brand. You are the spokespeople. This needs your sign off on it. If you're not going to sign off on anything, there's nothing we can do here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're the ones that are liable. Right. And I think that's the kind of thing that a lot of people don't necessarily understand too, whether it's whether you're doing it in-house or you're contracting out to an agency. You need to have your finger on the pulse and be okay giving your input and signing off on things, because as you and I both know, you can't do marketing in a silo. Silos don't work anymore. Like, it needs to be collaborative in between different departments and external contractors, so everybody's on the same page. And if you're not willing to do that, then you can't be surprised that your strategy or whatever it is that you have isn't working. That's the other thing that I find comes up a lot too. Everybody always asks the question about, like, why is what I'm doing, like, why isn't it working? And it's like, well, it's because you don't have clear, defined, set goals, and you're not willing to work with the people that you've put in place to help you do that.
You can't just dip your toe in. You gotta dive in and be a part of it from like beginning to end, and you have to be all in. I want to segment the three different your job titles: copywriter, social media strategist, and publicist. I want to just take a little bit of time. What does a copywriter do? Let's just start there.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Copywriter basically handles any type of copy that you need written that is action driven or sales driven. So these are things like, I've done a lot of websites. I've done, back in the day, I did quite a bit of print collateral for trade shows and showrooms and things like that. Your social media ads, your email campaigns, basically any type of copy that's kind of primarily focused on driving actions. So stuff like if you have a sales promotion, so any sort of copy that you're using for email or for social media where you're driving traffic to a sales page or like a promotion on your website. Copywriting is really sort of goal driven and is really focused on two things. It's benefits to the consumer. So whatever it is that you put that piece of writing on, whether it's a social media ad, whether it's print collateral, customers have to know, it's like, what's the benefit to me? How is this going to solve my problems? And how is this going to help me? Like, that's really what copywriting is supposed to address. And then, you have that call to action at the bottom there that drives them to, call, send an email, book an appointment, whatever it is that you want them to do to reach your end goal, which could be things like driving more sales, getting more email subscriptions, getting more people to come to like your actual physical showroom, things like that. And it's different from content writing, which I've also done a lot of. And that's more educational and informative driven. So that's more of your blog posts and like your typical, freelance articles, things like that are more driven to like educating people rather than trying to push them to do something.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to ask a subjective question, but I'm going to try to word it in a way that hopefully will give listeners just a like helpful tool in their toolkit or tidbit. So what are the key ingredients to being a successful copywriter? And I know you just listed so many different mediums that that copywriting is applicable for, but is there something that that comes to mind that kind of separates a good copywriter from a great copywriter?
It's really about, for me, in my experience anyway, doing your research, and that is like research into your client's company, research into, their competitors and what the industry's like, so that you can kind of nail down the general terminology. Then it's about finessing that terminology and how writing for keywords, keeping track of SEO so that, they can drive search results with their website, if it's a website and things like that, keeping those things in mind. And also looking at the really big thing is, again, benefits to the consumer. How do you put that into a compelling headline right away so you get to the point right away, because you want people to read that piece, right? Whether it's in a magazine, whether you want them to click and open the email, like what's that hook, that benefit that you can get to right away. And in terms of backing that up with the body copy, then it's about, how can you continue to emphasize those points, and why, like, I just talked in recent weeks about writing a good email funnel and like a welcome email, and how you can continue to nurture the subscribers you have. Well, a lot of that is about getting to the point about what they can expect from you, the benefits they can expect from being your subscriber, and why they should continue to subscribe, because here's what you have in store for them in terms of the schedule of, like, if you're sending something out twice a month, what can they expect, month to month or week to week, on the type of information that you're going to give them that's going to help drive your end goals, whether it's, hey, I'm sending out this educational piece I want you to read, or hey, I've got a sales promotion coming up that I want you to take a look at and hopefully buy something, right? So it's all about keeping that part in mind. Like, I think where a lot of people get tripped up is that they spent too much time thinking about the bubble of their business, right? It's like, they're so happy with, like, I'm launching product X and it's got all these great features, and they're focusing about what it looks like and everything. And meanwhile, their target audience, the consumer, is like, hey, that's great. But what is it going to do for me? Right.
Oh, it's not great.
Right. Like, it's like, oh, hey, it looks cool, but like, what is it going to do for me? Right. And that's the problem, I think, in general, a lot of people have with anything related to marketing, whether it's copywriting or publicity, is that they spend so much time, and it's understandable, but they spend so much time kind of stuck in their own bubble about what their project is or what their product or service is, that they can't put themselves in their audience's shoes about, hey, like, if you were going to buy this, what would make you want to buy it? What would you want to know, right? I don't think that most business owners spend enough time kind of changing their own perspectives and kind of putting themselves in the audience's shoes about what it is that they would actually want to know. And that's kind of where a lot of people end up going wrong with their marketing, because their strategic thinking is not where it needs to be. And then that's why the content doesn't fulfill their goals.
Yeah. So I think, to summarize a couple points that you highlighted, for like a good copywriter, it's research. I love that. That's really important. I think that's key. I'm going to shorten it to say, like, clear communication, because you mentioned just like you're communicating kind of the expectations of whatever it is that you're trying to deliver. I'm a big fan of less is more, and like a minimalist. So I think that falls in line or complements with being a clear communicator. I always think, if I can get across, and it's not always, but if I can explain what I'm doing to like a grandparent and not get lost in all the jargon of the product or whatever, like, you should be able to really simplify your language to get your point across and not fluff it up and make it too complicated. So I'm a fan of just less is more and clear communication. And then shifting to social media strategist, what do you do specifically when it comes to, hey, Lilian, I want to hire you specifically for that component of your job. What can you do for me?
Well, on the social media side, it's typically twofold for what I do for clients. It's I help them develop the strategy in relation to developing a content calendar. So keeping things organized by platform, by theme, so that, they always know what type of content is going out when. And then when it's all laid out in a calendar format, then it's easier to see what's been approved versus what's still being worked on, and kind of making sure that they have, like their set goals of like what, how do you want to divvy up your content mix, like doing promotion for your products or your services versus stuff that's a little bit more lighthearted. That's why you see a lot of businesses mark like theme days, like, hey, it's National Pie Day or whatever, to kind of get more interactivity from their audience. And I always try to tell them that it's like, anytime I do social media, it's also kind of an 80-20 mix. You spend 80% of the time doing content curation where you're sharing great content from other people you follow or other people in the industry, because then it gives your audience the impression that you are in the know in the industry. You know what's going on, you've got your ear to the ground and everything, so they know that they can come to you for that type of information, on top of what you're doing to promote your business in terms of your products and your services and your projects as well. So when I develop a strategy, I always start off by asking them, what are your short-term goals? So like, say in the next 3 months you're doing like previously I did this for a client where he was doing quite a few festivals and doing talks and seminars at those festivals. And he had a book that he wanted to sell, right? So he wanted more people to come to his seminars. He wanted to sell out, the copies of his book that he would bring with him. So I'm like, okay, that's a 3-month kind of shorter term goal that we can work with. So I started developing a strategy of not just, announcing that he was going to be at a typical festival on this date and what he was going to be doing. Sure, that was part of it on a weekly basis. We would at least incorporate, 2 to 3 posts on that. But the rest of it was all about, inspirational quotes work really well. So we started pulling some of those that he used in his book to ask for people's opinions on those. And then because we wanted to, emphasize his experiences as an animator and a teacher of animation, started sharing, stills from previous projects that he had worked on and asking people questions about what they were working on, and just kind of incorporating sort of the larger picture of what he was all about, in addition to doing this promo for things that, what he had going on, right? So whenever I build a strategy, it's really about, incorporating your short-term goals versus your long-term goals, and also incorporating some fun in there, incorporating, other things in terms of the industry that you're in order to have people, like, give them the impression that you are someone who pays attention to what's going on in the industry. And, once we kind of have that part settled, then I help them out with the campaign execution part in terms of developing all the written content. Sometimes that also includes the engagement piece. Sometimes it doesn't, depending on, what the client feels more comfortable with. It's like, well, if you feel better doing the engagement yourself, I will leave that piece to you. If for you don't have time, though, I'd be happy to kind of go in and help you to build those relationships with key people in the industry and in your target audience, as well as putting the content out and responding to your audience when they choose to comment or whatever it is on the things that we're posting. So it is kind of twofold, where I really help them try to develop a strategy and keep that organized with a content calendar. And then I also help them with the campaign execution part, where it's like, okay, we have this content and it's going to go out on this day, then I'll help you send that out. And if you want me to do the engagement piece, I can as well, to kind of help you build your audience and have more of an impact on just what everybody in your target audience is doing, and helping you to build those relationships as well.
Mm-hmm. And what I know, when I first started, my career like in the auto industry, and I helped build um, the company's social media accounts like from scratch.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, I think there was this need, and I think I fell for it as well, that we need to be on all platforms. We need to be on all platforms. And then I kind of realized over time, not really a good strategy. It's not really, if you want to do it effectively, unless you have the resources, people, um, money, and time to be able to put into what it actually takes to be, in quotes, successful on all platforms. I don't know that many, aside from like very, very large brands that do a really good job on all platforms. I think for businesses, it depends on the sector, which platforms you should be on and focus your attention on. So is there a rule of thumb of how many platforms a business should focus on? Should they be on 2, 3, 4, 1, 5 platforms? How many do you think?
I always suggest that if someone's just starting out, start with, it might seem like a lot, but start with two. And what those two are will depend on, as you say, what the business is, what the industry is, and kind of where your target audience is. And the reason why I suggest two is because you can do reciprocal promotion, right? So if there's most of the work that I do for clients and what I do for myself is on Twitter and Instagram. So you can always do reciprocated posts where, you know, essentially the same content, but it's tweaked a little bit for both platforms and for both audiences. And you can always drive traffic to both of them that way when you have reciprocated promotion without just regurgitating what you put on Twitter onto Instagram, right? And I think what you start to learn as you go along is that even though, you know, you are you on both platforms, you always have a slightly different audience depending on um, what your target audience is. Like for me, um, I have a tendency to interact with more podcasts on Instagram, but on Twitter, that's where the bulk of my filmmaker community lives, and you know the media as well. Like you know the critics and the reviewers and the writers, like those guys are super active on Twitter. So the content that you know you put out on Instagram is going to be slightly different than what you put out on Twitter. Maybe some of the key messaging, like keywords, will be the same, but you're going to shorten it. You're going to make it a little bit more punchy for Twitter. You're going to have shorter, maybe shorter copy and maybe shorter videos. Whereas on Instagram, you can do a bit of a longer post in addition to some great imagery, right? So it's really about, a lot of it is about trial and error and really kind of figuring out where your niche is and kind of what works best for you. And whenever you bring in a third party freelancer or an agency, the bulk of what we do a lot is research as well, right? To really get a feel for, you know, where you're at in your industry and where you're at in your business and where you want to grow to, and kind of what you've done before that has worked versus what hasn't worked, and just figuring out kind of how to build on that, and also coming up with new ideas. Like there's a lot of people, and some of this I actually recently learned in business coaching as well. There's a lot of people that aren't very good at sharing their brand story in a way that relates to their audience. Brand story being how and why you started your business, some of the struggles you've been through, you know, some of the things that you've learned. Just being able to say, hey, I know you're struggling with this because I've been through it as well, and this is the transformation that I've gone through in order to do what I do in my business, there's not enough people that are relating to their audiences in that way. So in some ways, it's kind of a disconnect. It's like, you'll get the comments where people say congratulations, or they say good for you, or they'll send you a bunch of emojis, but you're not actually getting that key, meaningful engagement because what you're saying to them isn't resonating. Like, everybody will comment on a giveaway, everybody will want to get in on a sale, but when it comes to actual, meaningful content, there's still not enough people that are willing to actually put themselves out there. And I mean, I get it. For years, I spent just putting out results of the projects that I've done. So like if I've done a PR campaign for a client, here's just a sampling of all the coverage I was able to get for them. Because I figured, I'm like, hey, nobody wants to hear about what I've been through. I just want my work to speak for itself.
Yeah.
You want me to help you out on this? These are the kinds of results I can get for you. But it kind of got to the point where it's like, sharing the results is great, but they don't actually know me. Like, they have an idea of what I can do, but they have no idea how I do it or why I do it, or, the type of person I am. And the more I thought about it, it's like the more I figured, I'm like, people don't just sign up with you because of the results you can get, but they sign up with you because they want to work with you as a person.
Yeah, they want to buy into what you stand for and represent as well, right? Like, people invest in like people. People are very, especially when it comes to buying and putting money out there, it's it's emotional. It's usually based on like emotions. I want to buy a Tesla because I like what Elon Musk is doing and what he represents, and going electric and saving the environment and all those kind of things. So I think that's really important. And that's also kind of ironic because it's also scary to, I think a really good step for businesses is to do, and this has been, I've talked about this a number of times on my podcast, if your company does not have a vision, mission, and values, or it needs updating, update it. And that just gives you it gives you clarity on the direction that you want to go, and it'll make collaborating with other with marketers a lot easier. It'll make their job a lot easier because it shows that they've spent a little bit of time knowing who they are, where they want to go, what are their values, what's their mission, what's their vision. I think that's really a good step in the right direction.
Absolutely. And it's just tough sometimes because they don't, not everybody spends enough time thinking about those things in relation to their businesses. And if they did, when they first started, they also don't necessarily feel like they need to update it. If it's been a few years, it's like, well, things have changed. You could have grown, you could have, added to your product suite, you could have hired more people. Things are always growing and changing, and it's always good to revisit that and figure out, it's like, did the things that I thought I believed in and wanted to stand for when I started this still hold water 2, 3, 5, 10 years later?
Yeah, I think it should be like a revisited practice, whether it's depending on what sector you're in, if it's, every couple years or 5 years or whatever, but I think it should be revisited and updated accordingly. And ironically, through that process too, it's difficult for people to share bits of themselves out on social media. You hear about the negatives of it, and so it can be discouraging. But honestly, I find the more that I've shared about myself, thoughts or whatever, and put myself out there more, I've had nothing but more of a net positive than a a negative out there. And I think companies can be the same. I'm a big fan of transparency. I think that transparency should be incorporated into a company's marketing, and there should be, as much transparency as possible internally so that people within the organization know what is going on. Goes back to like the silo thing that you had mentioned. Like silos don't work anymore, or you're just going to have not as much success. So I think that transparency is really a good idea, but I know that it's difficult for some.
Yeah, and that actually plays into another one of the things that I do as a publicist, which is coming up with a crisis communication strategy. Most of the time, when you try to bring something like that up, most businesses will always dismiss it out of hand because they're like, it's not a priority. Well, here's the thing. It's not a priority until something happens. And then when something happens, you're already behind the 8 ball. And for most businesses, you can kind of kiss your reputation goodbye because they don't have a clear-cut strategy and process on how to deal with these things. And I mean, it could be anything. Like any negative situation has the potential to turn into a crisis, but not every negative situation starts out as a crisis. And then how you address that will determine how bad it's going to get and what the outcome's going to be. And in putting those things together, I mean, not every company is 50 to 100 strong, right? So you may not need an extensive one, but you need something, if you have a customer service complaint, what's your process of dealing with that? Who's going to be in charge of the person that it gets reported to? And then you have to come up with, a strategy on if you're going to have meetings about this situation, who's the key people you want in on that meeting who know what's going on? And then your messaging. What's some of your, key messaging that you can kind of draft up so that you at least have a template available for if something happens on how to address it, right? Some common, scenarios you could put into the strategy would be things like there's a customer service complaint, there's a human rights kind of violation that happens, say at your restaurant or whatever. There's a customer that feels discriminated against. It's a financial concern where, God forbid, you have an employee who's embezzling money, or things like, you've done an interview and it's gone out there, but for whatever reason, the person that interviewed you put in some incorrect information. How do you address that? What's the process for addressing it? How do you do it as quickly as possible? And what that helps them do is that, you're being honest and transparent about what happened and how you're addressing it, and moving forward, how you're going to prevent something like that from happening again. And when you do that, customers and the media, if it reaches the media, appreciate that, because you're being honest, you're being transparent, and if anything else, that might even increase their loyalty to you because they know that you're the kind of person that will stand up and go, hey, I screwed up. I'm sorry. This is how I'm going to rectify the situation, and moving forward, I'm going to do better. And I think not enough businesses kind of see the benefits of that because they're always like, well, nothing's happened. Mm-hmm. The thing about that is it doesn't matter how big your business or your brand is. It's no one's immune. Sooner or later, something's going to happen. And you really don't want to be caught off guard when something happens. You want to be prepared. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Mm. And, if you're not prepared, then you're going to, there's dozens of horror stories you could end up on. I mean, there's restaurants I've seen who have threatened unhappy customers with, slander, saying, you're slandering us, therefore we're going to bring up a lawsuit, instead of addressing the heart of the issue, which is a customer service issue, to try and make amends, to try and rebuild that relationship and strengthen it. They've only doubled down on making it worse. And that's what you don't want to do, right? There's not enough people out there that see the benefits of putting something like that together. And that's something that I always stress, that everybody needs one. Even if it's just a bare bones framework, you need to have an idea of what you're going to do if something goes wrong.
Yeah, that's a very logical way to look at it. And the the way, like, everything that you said makes total logical sense. And I don't want to go into a side tangent, but I know the US election is happening right now, and just like everything that you said is the complete opposite of like what Trump is doing. And oh my God. But you're thinking logically, and that works in a logical environment. There's illogical scenarios and people that run businesses or politicians or leaders or whatever as well. So hopefully, yes, I without going down a side tangent, I think everything that you said, I totally agree with. And I'm surprised too how long some companies, I'm surprised and not surprised how long some companies took to even respond to, say, like COVID, and how that affected their business from a publicist standpoint. Like, some were quick, and the responses from leaders of organizations were great and transparent, and you knew that they had direction, or in terms of like uncertainty, they had some sort of some building blocks to kind of help them navigate this unknown new area of business and how they were going to carry forward. And then others took too long, or whatever, did the opposite and didn't handle it that well. So I think it's just great to have, I think, like you said, have a crisis plan. And yeah, sure, anything can turn into a crisis. Doesn't mean that it will, but like, even going through the exercise of maybe things that aren't that bad and playing worst case scenario, you might, come up with phrases or terms or things that can help support some bigger concerns that might pop up. But, if you can focus your attention on some of the big what ifs, and try to problem solve around that, I think that would be definitely helpful. And going back to an earlier question that I had, what are like, if you had like 2 or 3 ingredients that make a successful social media strategist and publicist, because you had already answered the copywriter, what do you think would be a couple of really like great ingredients?
I always tell people, my motto for my business is that I'm in the storytelling and relationship building business. And a lot of that is because both with social media and publicity, what you're doing is telling a story. You're sharing a story about yourself, about your brand, about what your project is on, or your latest product. Like, you're sharing that part of what you're working on and what you're about. And I think on both levels, it's building that strategy. So those building blocks of like, on both cases, like what your overall goals are, whether it's building a positive online reputation, whether it's wanting to increase sales, whether it's wanting to be seen as an industry leader so that you can get more of those key brand partnerships, sponsorships, interest from investors, whatever it is that you're looking for. It's, building that key strategy that's based on those goals, number one. And number two, when you're looking at sharing your story, again, putting yourself into the audience's shoes, what part of your story is going to be compelling for them to want to learn about on social media, watch your movie, read your book, listen to your podcast? What's compelling about that? What is it that makes you different? It's a question I always put out to clients and prospective clients, and to really get them thinking about that. So, figuring out what parts of your story can be compelling to your audience, building the strategy that will help promote your story the right way to kind of reach those goals. And also just doing your research as to where the right people are. In the case of the PR strategy, that would be, where's the media you want to contact? Like if you are in film, you don't want to be pitching the guy who writes about business. That's not really going to help you, right? It's not really going to help you, and it's going to not do anything for building your relationship with that person, because you're sending them something that they're never going to be interested in. And on social media, it's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, if you are, I see this a lot more with guys that are more so in the retail sphere and also food and beverage sphere, because they kind of have the assumption that what they're selling is good for everybody. Mm. And as you know, I'm sure your cornerstone of marketing is that if you try to appeal to everybody, you appeal to nobody.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really about, narrowing down who is it that you're actually speaking to. So it's about audience building and building that relationship with them, and figuring out, how to tell your story in such a way that resonates with them, and doing it from a publicity standpoint in a lot of ways is the same as doing it on social media. Like, what are the different ways you can share that story? And in essence, they're also really connected in the sense that when I get a piece of press coverage for a client, I will figure out ways to repurpose that piece of press coverage so you can extend the shelf life on that on social media. Because then it's like, oh, the initial interview, well, that reaches people that are following that media outlet, and it reaches the people that want to read it or listen to it. But then it's like, what about your extended audience on social media? Well, then you take that piece of press coverage and you turn it into a blog. You turn it into, quote images. You turn, your podcasts into audiograms to try and entice people to go read that piece of press coverage or listen to it. And then you end up helping the media outlet get more of an audience too. So then you start building those reciprocal relationships, not just with your own audience, but with their audiences and with the person that has interviewed you or reviewed, your project and everything. So it's why I tell people I'm in the storytelling and relationship building business, because it's so intertwined with both those things. And what you're doing from a publicity standpoint is also intertwined with social media, because you're using social media to promote that piece of press coverage that you've gotten, right? So it's very much a circle, really. It's very cyclical what I do, and nothing ever, going back to the silo thing, nothing ever exists in a vacuum. It's very cyclical, and having those audiences on both sides is it's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Oh, I love that. I want to go in so many different rabbit holes. How did you get into, we're going to pivot a little bit. How did you get into film?
That actually started when I had grabbed an internship opportunity with a firm that at the time was doing a lot more, like my boss was more into sports and fitness, beauty and fashion were sort of her main areas. But she actually wanted to get more into film because, she was from LA and, had built quite the network for herself down there as well. So she made the choice to join the union as a unit publicist because she wanted to do more of like the bigger blockbuster type projects. And I was working for her at the time, first as an intern, and then I transitioned into being a contractor. And in order to get experience in film, you know, if she wanted those big blockbuster projects, we needed to kind of figure out what the where to get that experience from. So I, working for her, she managed to grab a couple different projects. One was there was an actor, a child actor, who had two projects premiering at TIFF that year. So I took the lead in pitching a lot the Toronto media and liaisoning with a contact of ours who was going over there to help us manage the red carpet portion of it, and ended up sort of running the PR strategy from here for the child actor in Toronto when he had two films premiering there, and just kind of managing all the interviews and all the media relations portion of it. The other film project that I did while I was at that agency was there was a horror film that was going through what's known as the Cinecoup Film Accelerator here in Canada. And these guys usually do it every year, where it's like a huge kind of contest where they accept 120 films. Usually, I think it's primarily horror, but they're all genre related. And each one of these films, they narrow it down as they go along, but every single week they have different missions. You know, you gotta create a trailer for your film, you gotta do up your poster and everything. And there was one particular film, they were coming up on the week where their mission was to get publicity. So the agency got brought in, and I helped create their PR strategy, where it was, you know, trying to get them some coverage. And we got coverage from, you know, horror outlets all over the States and Canada, and a couple in the UK as well. And towards the end of it, they actually ended up being one of the top 5 films that were optioned for development. They didn't get the $1 million prize, that went to first place, but they ended up getting optioned for development. So after getting my feet wet with both of those, I thought, you know, let's see if I can, you know, I had fun. Let's see if I can do this on my own, just to prove to myself that I can actually get this done, right? And then from there, I ended up doing 1 year of the Crazy Eights film event in Vancouver, where, you know, they had 6 films that they accepted into it. So these guys all had 8 days to shoot, edit, and basically finalize a film project, right? So I was brought in to help sort of manage the press component of it, pre-production, during production, so managing like scheduling on-set interviews and things like that, and then post-production. And for a few of those guys, I ended up staying on as they got onto the festival circuit as well, and helping them manage their press strategy for the festival circuit. And then from there, just kind of ended up picking up projects here and there, usually leads that I got from Twitter and like other networking platforms and everything. And that actually segued into the audience engagement platform that I'm a co-founder of. It's known as the Ignite Universe. And that came about because my fellow co-founder brought me on as the publicist for a VR short film that she was producing. So after we did that together, she said, you know, hey, I have this idea for, you know, that might eventually end up becoming a startup. You know, do you want to kind of help me out with that? And we've kind of spent the last year and a half sort of turning back and forth on like what we sort of want that to be and how we can kind of make it work for our target market of filmmakers and everything. And now I think we've kind of hit upon what we want it to do, which is, you know, we want to build an engagement platform where filmmakers can take control of their marketing and engagement on a platform that, you know, they own, as opposed to doing it on a third-party platform like Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and also having that engaged audience that not only engages each other on a filmmaker's film, but they have a ready audience there for them that's also engaging each other on others' films. So it's basically like this community that we want to build that's going to help them really leverage their films for, you know, getting into your AAA film festivals, getting distribution, getting investors, that kind of thing. So we're in the I'd say sort of the beta stage still of doing that, but I mean, so far it's worked out well. We got, you know, a good amount of people signing up for the first phase, so we'll see how that continues to grow. And I'm excited to kind of continue working on it and finessing, you know, things with the platform and figuring out best ways to kind of get people to join and engage with what we have on there.
And how does the circuit work? Because I'm just getting into acting on the side as well, but being an actor, I'd love to actually get like some speaking roles. I've been on set 5 times over the last few months here in the Okanagan. They're doing a ton of filming, so that's been great. I've submitted 7 self-tapes for speaking roles. So that's great. I haven't got a yes yet, but I think it's a numbers game. And, you know, once you get one speaking role, then you can have that on your resume and you can go up and yada, yada, yada. But how does it work from a distribution standpoint of who takes the movie and submits it to all the different festivals, and who goes to those different festivals to like promote it?
That's primarily, you know, because I work with a lot of indie productions, so like, you know, everybody's budget is different, right? But that's primarily the job of like the director and the producer to kind of narrow down, like, these are sort of the top tier festivals we want. So that's guys like TIFF, Sundance, Cannes, you know, and then like second tier versus third tier, because there's always a ton of different film festivals around. And sometimes it'll depend on, you know, the genre of your film and things like that. You know, it'll fit into different ones, but certainly the mainstream big guys is Sundance, Cannes, TIFF, Venice is pretty big, Berlin's pretty big, guys like that. So they basically come up with, you know, some filmmakers are more prolific with it. They'll come up with a giant database of like, you know, these are our top tier, these are our second tier, this is our third tier, so on. And then they'll figure out what kind of budget they have for submitting to these film festivals. A lot of times that budget will come from like grants that they've applied for, things like that, funding that they've applied for in Canada, like, you know, through Telefilm and other places like that. So they'll submit to these festivals, and then once they hear back that, you know, they've gotten into this festival, then the promotion strategy can start in regards to saying, hey, we got into this festival, and you know, we're going to be playing on this day at this time, this kind of thing, because you want people to actually go watch the film. Now, prior to everything that was going on, most of that viewership would be in person, right? So it'd be like if you are doing, like, take a horror film festival, Blood in the Snow in Toronto is huge. Huge in the industry, huge for the genre. It's the big one that all the horror guys want to get into, right? So if you are playing Blood in the Snow, then you want to reach out to the Toronto general public, Toronto media, stuff like that. And then usually that's when I get brought in. Typically, I get brought in post-production when they, you know, they're on the festival circuit. They've started to hear these acceptances, and they're like, hey, we want press because we want more butts in seats during the screenings, and we want more publicity so that more people hear about it. It looks good to the distributors. It looks good to investors. so that it makes it easier for us to kind of do that sort of networking because we've got a whole pile of good reviews behind us, right? So like strategy I did for a client who was playing Blood in the Snow was like I started talking to my Toronto horror guys, telling them, hey, you know, I've got a client who's got a film playing Blood in the Snow. Are you interested in like reviewing the film and maybe interviewing them? They say yes. I give them a media screener, set up the interviews, and away we go in regards to getting everything confirmed, getting, you know, the reviews coming in, getting the interview schedule, and that will happen quite a bit over the festival schedule. Like your typical short film, which I've done a lot of press for a bunch of different short films, will play anywhere from like 20 to 40 different film festivals. Then it's a matter of, you know, kind of gauging which ones you maybe want to do press for versus ones that are maybe small enough that you know you're not going to get a lot of traction for, so you can kind of leave that one be, right? And usually film festivals are about getting you know, good reviews from the critics, getting the interviews from the journalists and everything, getting early audience hype, so that when you go to these big, and a lot of these big ones will have industry events, right? So that's where you go to do all of your networking with distributors, with sales agents, with investors and stuff like that, who, if they see that your film has great reviews behind them, has a lot of audience praise, you know, you've kind of done the press circuit so that they know that, you know, you've gotten a lot of great coverage and you can get them more, then it's more likely, not a guarantee, but it's more likely that your film's going to get picked up by a distributor, you know, for streaming, or maybe you might want to go the broadcast route, or whatever it is that you want to do, right? So going on the festival circuit and having a publicity strategy as part of that makes it a lot easier to appeal to distributors for streaming, or appeal to investors if, say, you want to turn your short film into a feature, and getting those guys on board, because they're the ones with the deep pockets who can kind of help you finance the production and the marketing and everything else, makes it easier to do that. So typically most of the film stuff I've done has been guys that have gone on to the circuit.
And I know, thanks for answering that. For your business, you typically work with 1 to 2 clients at a time, or at least that's what we had talked about last time. Has that changed at all, or is that still your preferred number of clients that you like to work with?
It depends on the workload, you know. I mean, I've done 3 to 4 concurrently. There's been times on the publicity side where I've had 3 clients all play the same film festival, you know. So it really kind of depends on, particularly working in film. It's very much more of a long game kind of strategy, right? Because as I said, I typically don't get brought in until post-production. I can start talking to them during production, but most guys have such tight timelines when it comes to filming that they really don't have the leeway to have, you know, press on set most of the time. So usually it's very much a longer game, because post-production, depending on what they're doing with the film, can be 6 months, can be a year, can be a year and a half, 2 years. It depends on what they need to have done, right?
Yeah.
And once you get on the festival circuit, it's also about, like, it's a cyclical in terms of when they submit versus when they hear acceptance and rejections, right? A lot of times there's festivals going all year round, but your typical really busy time is September, October, November. Because September, you know, late September into October, you have VIFF and TIFF always overlap. Okay. So those are the big ones. And then a lot of your horror film festivals will go in October, like Blood in the Snow typically goes in October. New York as well. And then going into November, some of the smaller ones, like I believe the DC Shorts Film Festival in Washington, DC is November. So that's usually your really busy time, but you can get accepted to festivals all year round. It's just usually when September, October, November hits. I mean, I've done, like I said, campaigns for 3 different clients who are playing the same film festival, or sometimes there's overlap on, like, you know, a client will be playing 2 different film festivals on the same weekend,
Right.
kind of thing. So they decided that they need, you know, press for 2 different areas on the same weekend. So then it's a matter of, like, when I have those deadlines on what those days are, then I work backwards. And usually for publicity, I tend to try and give the media at least 3 weeks to kind of pitch them, to follow up, to you know, schedule interviews and reviews and stuff like that into their schedules. Because everybody's busy, particularly with, you know, indie film. If it's a larger festival, there's always going to be guys clamoring to review stuff for TIFF. There's always going to be guys clamoring to review stuff for Blood in the Snow or Fantastic Fest, any of the even bigger indie ones. It's going to get busier. You're kind of competing with other films when it comes to getting a certain, you know, reviewers to clear in their schedule time to do an interview, time to do a review. You know, whatever it is, right? So I always try to give them at least 3 weeks to pitch, to follow up, to schedule things, out of respect for my media contacts and kind of what I know they have on their plates, right? So it's always better to find out when a client gets accepted to a festival earlier. So then it's like, okay, I have this date blocked off. When am I going to start pitching? Okay, I need to have, you know, the news release finalized. We need to have the media kit finalized. You need to make sure that, you know, I have all the film stills and your headshots and everything ready to go, so that a month, 3 weeks out, I can start pitching and we can kind of start building this momentum for you guys before the actual screening.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's just like anything else related to marketing, is that you kind of have to make sure you build in enough time. You know, I've lost track of how many times I've seen guys say that they've got an event this weekend and it's 3 days out and they need help. And I'm just like, look, it's like, it's not that I don't want to help you, but I can't, there's nothing I can do here out of respect to the media and where I know their schedules are at and everything. It's like, you can't, it's not a quick turnaround kind of thing. And if you get lucky one time and you manage to get some kind of coverage, even if you're like a week out, you can't expect that to happen every single time.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's really dependent on other people's schedules and kind of, not even just schedules, but, you know, if they've covered similar things in recent weeks, often they're not going to give you coverage because it's too close together. And they're like, well, our audience is not going to want to read about that if it's that close together.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to factor that into it too, right? So it's a lot of strategic thinking and planning and just keeping things organized at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a timely question. We're still in, at the time of this recording, it's October 2020. Sorry, November. It's now November 2020. And we're still in the pandemic. How has the pandemic affected you? Could be professionally and personally if you want. And just how have you what changes have you made, and yeah, I'll just kind of keep it broad and let you go into any kind of riff that you want, but talk about the pandemic and its effects that it's had on you.
Well, on a mindset side of things, I find myself, and I highly recommend this, listening to a lot of Lewis Howes's School of Greatness podcast.
Okay.
And one of the big things why is because Lewis interviews people from all different walks of life, all different professionals, athletes, celebrities, authors, therapists, on, and pretty much everything that they focus on is really about mindset
Mm.
and how to build a good mindset and how to overcome adversity and everything. Like the first interview I listened to, actually not that long, literally just before everything shut down and not that long after we lost him, was a really in-depth one that he did with Kobe Bryant.
Mm.
And listening to Kobe talk about just how he's approached different things and his philosophy and everything. Like he gave a great example. One of the girls he mentored played for UConn, University of Connecticut,
Mm.
and she would come down and train with his daughter's basketball team. And one time she came by, and UConn had just lost their last game really badly to Notre Dame. And Kobe asked her, he said, did you watch the game tape? She goes, no. Why would I want to relive, the failure and where we screwed up because we lost? And Kobe says to her, he's like, you rewatch the game tape because it helps you figure out where you went wrong so you can learn from it. Even if you won the game, you always rewatch the game tape because it's going to teach you the little things that you missed, the things that you should change, how, the mistakes that you're going to stop yourself from making next time.
Mm.
And it's like, that's a lesson that I take with me, because it's like, it's not about, nobody wants to relive when they've screwed up. Nobody wants to do that. But I think the important thing to take out of that is that, that's how you learn,
Yeah, totally.
right? It is looking at where you went wrong and what you could be doing better next time. As he put it, even if you won,
Mm.
there's things that you could learn, right? So Lewis talks to a ton of people about that. Like Chris Lee is one of his favorite mindset coaches, and one of his earliest episodes, he talked about you build the environment that you want to live in, right? Like, say you come home from pulling a 10 to 12 hour day, you've been stuck in traffic, you come home, you're already tired, you're already stressed, and you find out your kid's drawn all over the walls. So Chris goes, you have a choice. You can build an environment where like anger and more stress and toxic negativity
Mm.
is the environment that you're living in based on how you choose to react. Or you can choose to build an environment where you are more calm, you focus on, more structured communication, more of a problem solving type of situation, instead of always leaning automatically on your emotions, which are negative, which are toxic, which, anger, things like that. So, I've been taught from a very young age, my older brother had always said to me, 10% of life is what happens to you. The other 90 is how you choose to react to it. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control how you choose to deal with it.
And
Those two
talking,
things are not mutually exclusive,
yes,
right?
sorry to jump in, and talking about mindset and that 10%, how much time you probably spend 90% of the time thinking of things that either happened in the past or in the future, and how much of that, if you're thinking about stuff in the future, how much of that stuff actually happens. Maybe 10% of it
Mm-hmm.
actually happens. So how much time are you spending in your head, and how much time are you spending being present? as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the great stuff that like Lewis talks about. The other thing is uh Brene Brown, another great, she's an academic. She's talked a lot about like embracing shame and how to deal with that on more of a healthier way. So listening to those things have really sort of set up my mindset, I guess,
Hmm.
for lack of a better word, going into all this and just figuring out, because I look at this year as two things: resiliency and gratitude.
Hmm.
It's like I've got family in the States. I'm worried sick about them on a physical health level, but also a mental health level, because we haven't seen each other since last Christmas. Who knows? So yeah, like I'm worried about them, but I am grateful that we're all still healthy
Yeah.
and we're able to continue to, for the most part, still do the things that we want to do, you
Mhm.
know, on a daily basis. And the resiliency part is just um, figuring out like how I want to continue to move forward business wise, right? Like this year is the first year I've ever invested in business coaching. And it's really kind of changed my mindset even on like I had mentioned earlier. I had spent years not talking about my brand story, thinking that just sharing the results of what I'm able to do should be enough. My work should speak for itself. But in signing up with my business coach, really learning that people do want to hear from you and know more about what I'm about and what makes me tick and why I do what I do, um, and just being able to, my motto these days is celebrate the small victories. There
Gratitude.
might there might be days where, you only do one thing the whole day. But guess what? Hey, at least you got that one thing done. Like that's worth being celebrated too. Not everybody in all this, because I've talked to a lot of new friends and old who are, for some people it's been business as usual because they're in essential services, right? So they're still working outside of the home and everything else, and nothing's really changed for them. And for other people, it's like, like a girlfriend of mine who's stuck in the house, 90% of the time with two kids under 5, and
Mhm.
trying to figure out like how to not just manage their mindset, but manage her own,
Mhm.
you know. So it's different for everybody, and for me, it's like I always look at the side of, um, what can I control in terms of how I choose to focus on things emotionally, and also what I can actually do, right? Like in terms of like for my business, it's like my content strategy, the stuff I choose to put out there and everything else. That's the stuff that I can control. The other things in terms of like, going grocery shopping and worrying about whether or not other people are wearing masks, it's like, yeah, my philosophy, to put it a little bit blunt about this, is like even if you put a gun to somebody's head, you can't force them to do something they're not going to want to do. So why worry about it? All you can do is, focus on yourself and figure out how to safeguard yourself from things like this public health emergency that we're living in, and how to focus on better ways to kind of protect your own mental health as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I think a really good point too. And I saw um, Joe Rogan do a post the other day of because it was just around election day, and a lot of people are obviously stressed and feeling a
mhm,
whole range of emotions in regards to that. He just said, like, work out, go break a sweat. That will center you. Like, what is in
mhm,
your control? Go like exercise. Take a moment, 5 minutes to write down what you're thankful for. And it could just
mhm,
be like your your health. You're thankful for the ability to write. I am
mhm,
thankful to be able to write this right now. Like,
mhm,
I think Yeah, gratitude is a great daily practice, and I think if you can get out of your head, a great way to do that is by like physically moving your body as much
Hmm.
as you're able to. Um, and like, yeah, mindfulness and meditation practices, like going back to the present. I think that's, focus on your breathing, on your breath. That's so key. It's like, I remember I walked this morning, and on my way back, I just stopped. I leaned back against the railing, and it's been a little bit cloudy here in the Okanagan the last few days. And the sun was shining, and I just stopped and I leaned back on the railing. I just closed my eyes and I just let the like sun beat on my face, and I just like focused on my breath for honestly 45 seconds. And I
Hmm.
felt so much better doing that and grounding myself. And I was in a totally fine, great mood before I did it. But man, you just like have a sense of peace when you do that, And I think it's good to try to, yeah, feel as peaceful as you can and control with what, I don't know, whenever I watch the news or see what's going on the macro level,
Hmm.
it's quite discouraging, but there's so many great things that are going on as well, but not enough of those get highlighted because the news is very negative driven. So I think anytime you watch something that's happening to like a country, um, there's so many like small micro things that you can do and just focus on yourself that your attention is spent well doing that.
I just think it's a healthier outlook, right? Because I mean, don't get me wrong, nobody's happy with the way things are going.
Yeah.
It's like, I was supposed to do a 2-week trip to the UK in May, and that's been postponed. I want to be able to see my brother's family. They want to come home to see our parents and all this kind of thing too.
Yeah.
But for now, like it is what it is, right? Like everybody needs to kind of do what they need to do to stay sane. And I think some of the other side of it that I've seen a lot of people talk about is like toxic positivity and even toxic productivity, where they try to cajole and push a bunch, to like, now's your time to like write a screenplay or write a book or like start a business or whatever. And then there's people that are like, I can't even get out of bed,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that that's kind of the flip side of it, where it's like, a lot of that messaging might be doing more harm than good for people that are really struggling with that sort of thing. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of just doing what feels good to you. I mean, if you need to spend a day sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, like, you do you.
Mhm.
I'm not about to judge you for what you need to do to just kind of get through it and even feel a little bit better. Um, right. And for myself, I'm just like, at the end of the day, uh, this situation that we're living in, it's probably lasted a lot longer than everybody anticipated. But by the same token, these types of extreme measures aren't going to stick around forever. And on the other side of that, I want to be able to have something to show for it on a professional level, on a personal level, that I've actually, not just sat here and gotten moldy for months on end because I didn't feel like doing anything, right? And it's just like, now is the time. I felt like now is the time for me to do what I've been doing, because I had the resources, I had the money, and I understand that not everybody does, but I did, and I'm like, now's my opportunity. Because if I don't seize it now, then like there's never going to be a perfect time.
Yeah, for sure. I know another a buddy of mine who I've had on the podcast, Marty. Him and
Mhm.
I talked about how we're just like we're so sick of hearing, and I don't think he coined the term, but he came up with like the hustle porn, like how everyone's
Yeah.
just like hustle, hustle, just this nonstop hustle. And like I've done my fair share of digesting content from like Gary Vee, and
Hmm.
uh, I just a lot of this stuff I agree with, but it's just like, oh my God, this hustle porn mentality is just so, I don't know, gross. And just you don't need to just like be hustling all the time. I don't know, like yeah, it's too much. I just think it's too much.
Well, yeah, because there's also like there's a lack of a dividing line now, right? Because for people that are used to working out of the house, you
Yeah,
used to be able to separate those parts of your life, and now it's like you're home all the time. You're trying, for a lot of people, trying to juggle homeschooling kids, trying to juggle working from home, and in some cases maybe caregiving for like parents and stuff like that too. That you end up like, you know, maybe working 10 to 12-hour days when before you'd do 7.5,
yeah,
right?
totally.
So it's like, where's that line? Where do you kind of draw the line now so that you're still taking time out for yourself,
Yeah,
to stay healthy and to focus on what you love doing? Because I mean, life is short. Like you look at how many, like if I have any fears about what's going on, it's not even so much getting sick, it's the aftermath of what the more long-term effects of that will be, because so many people don't know,
yeah,
right? And you've seen like people, young people that are quote unquote healthy who end up dying from this, right? Like you just don't know, and you want to make the most out of whatever time you've got left doing what you can do that still brings you joy, I think.
yeah,
And actually, can give you the results that you want. And a lot of that also has to do with business, right? I mean, there's so many people struggling and suffering in regards to like having to close their doors or having to see their profits cut in half because they can only do so much online when they used to rely on bricks and mortar, right? And all of that is super hard. Like I don't envy the guys that really have to, that have been struggling with that. And it just comes down to, you've only got the one life and everybody has to do what they have to do. And I don't believe in hustling 24/7 because at some point you start to feel that fatigue too.
yeah,
And
yeah,
pushing through it, in my book anyway, is not always the best way to go about it because it can lead to like health problems and whatever else down the road too if if you're living that way day in and day out. So it's like, I mean, no, nobody's thrilled about where we're at right now. People would rather travel and go see family and do any number of things, but hey, like it is what it is and you have to try and make the best out of it right now.
yeah, totally. One thing that I've heard recently that I want to bring up whenever I can, because it's really good just to be aware of, is that like the way that we're designed, we only have the ability to like focus on one thing for up to like around 90 minutes. And then after that 90-minute mark, you tap into like an external source of energy. And whether that be like caffeine or like stress, and you kind of push, if you keep going, you're kind of if you were to just push through that 90 minutes and just keep going, keep going, keep going, which a lot of like our work day is structured that way, right? 8 hours. It's like how many people actually work 8 straight hours? Like you can't. Um, but anyways, after you push, if you keep pushing past this like 90-minute mark, you are unlearning how to rest. And you need to
Mm-hmm.
actually take a 5 to 10 minute break after
Mm-hmm.
that 90-minute mark to reset so that you can go into the next 90-minute window with like some vigor and energy. And you've rested yourself physically and mentally before you go back into the next thing. And I don't think you have to be so robotic about it either. My interpretation of it is like check in with yourself and how you're feeling at any point in time. And if you feel fatigued or stressed and you need a break, then just take 5 to 10 minutes to yourself to try to, get back to center, feel recharged, and then go into the next thing. So I think that's been just a helpful little tidbit that I think it's valuable for people to hear.
It's actually in my my client's book where he talks about working in passes.
Mm.
Actually, and he relates that to, when you're drawing something and when you're sketching something and working in passes, and also forcing yourself to do the pass for like an hour or an hour and a half, and then don't the biggest detriment is editing during the process. Whatever it is that you're working on, don't be editing when you're supposed to be creating, because then all you're doing is muddling everything and putting yourself behind in regards to the process. And working in productivity passes is like, you do an hour, then you take a break. You do an hour, you take a break, just to kind of have those pockets of time where you're really focused
Probably
on
with
like the
writing,
task at hand. Yeah.
right? Like writing or copywriting or something like, or if like you're writing a story, like
Mm-hmm.
just write, It doesn't have to be like a fine end,
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
Just like write, get it all out, flow as much as you can. Don't go back and edit. Just like keep getting it all out and then come back afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that I find is a more productive way of working, instead of just forcing yourself to say sit there for 3 hours and you've written like 3 sentences because you just, you can't, there's a blockage there. Like you just can't get past, you're thinking about so many other different things. You're trying, you think that the first line doesn't sound good, so you're trying to edit it while you're working on it, and it just doesn't work that way, and you end up wasting time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to give you a little bit of space on this question. What, and I don't know the best way to phrase the question, but I'll tee it up and then I'll let you kind of take it in whatever direction that you want. But I was going to ask, like, what's it like being a woman and a woman of color in business? And what are maybe some of the, I don't know, challenges or things that you want to maybe like shine the light on, that might be just worth shining the light on,
Um, it's
if there are.
interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because of course, a lot of this kind of thing has become into much sharper focus with what's been going on with BLM, and a lot of the lack of opportunity, and like lifelong microaggressions that a lot of people of color are suffering, outright racism and violence and all of that sort of thing too. And I can just say that for me, with my culture being, first generation Chinese born Canadian, and being raised by baby boomers who immigrated, in the 50s and 60s
Mhm.
after the war and everything else. I was raised in a very traditional culture, expected to sort of conform into the role of being the dutiful daughter, and having that 9 to 5 job for a couple of decades, and then retiring with a nice pension and everything, because of course that's what my parents did, you know. And me going on this journey was something they didn't understand and didn't support, and always kind of there was a lot of friction, and some emotional negativity in regards to financial independence and financial stability, and also just being able to be independent in general, while you're coming up against a lot of these kind of cultural expectations that this is what you're supposed to be doing, and having the steady job and stability, and because that's what they prioritized, was the stability above things like growth, above things like happiness, above things like being able to feel as though you're actually making an impact in whatever it is that you're doing for work, whether it's in-house or as part of your own business. They prioritized financial stability over all of that. Like, it didn't even matter to them whether you had good, being able to like go out for a drink with your colleagues on a Friday night to them would have never, it's like you do your job and you come home, and that's kind of it, right? So growing up, I kind of had that hammered into me. So doing what I do, there is definitely a lack of understanding and a lot of emotional issues surrounding that. Then it's about figuring out how you put real boundaries around that and just be like, at the end of the day, that I'm doing what I'm doing because I enjoy it. I love it. I'm doing well enough that I would never have to lean on you financially. And therefore, I'm just going to keep on my journey and also be really selective about what I choose to tell you, because you've shown in the past that you have a lack of understanding about these areas. It just does not gel with your perspective. Therefore, I don't need to hear it, because you haven't. That's the other big thing too, is they tell you in entrepreneurship and in business, don't ever take advice from people who haven't been there,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know what they're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? So putting all of that into a box and continuing to move forward in spite of that, I think is something that a lot of people from different cultures who are entrepreneurs can relate to, particularly if they don't have that kind of their family doesn't have that kind of entrepreneurship or business ownership type experience, because it's also like, the fact is like the world is changing, where you used to be able to get great benefits and the stability and do a job for 30 years. That's really not the case, no matter what industry you're in these days. So being able to land on your feet and change direction and take the bits and pieces that you did learn from being in-house and incorporate that into your business, I think is really important. And even just, learning how to navigate, like we talked a little bit earlier about like how the pandemic has kind of been an even playing ground in regards to showcasing which brands had a plan and which didn't in regards to managing things. Well, the other part of it is really kind of showcased what kind of leadership they have as well. I think that's the other real big eye opener from a business standpoint that this whole situation has kind of given us. It's like, what is good leadership, and what kind of leader do I want to be? Because I've been in situations in the past where people have claimed to me that I've been passed over for positions, possibly because of an issue of racial bias.
Mm.
Now, in that situation, I'm always like, well, even if that was the case, that might be true, but I can't prove it. And I've had biases in other areas. Interestingly enough, a geographical bias, and also a bias towards where I went to school. Those were interesting because I'd never expected those to come up like at all.
And is that coming from like a colleague that was also applying for that position? Like or
That one actually came from a businessman that I had actually attempted to network with, and that based on his understanding of where I was living at the time, and just the general makeup of people that would typically get marketing positions, that was his belief, that because you didn't see a lot of people of color at that juncture in marketing positions, that racial bias might have had something to do with it. Whereas while I couldn't prove that, there was actual implicit bias in regards to geography and even where I went to school. I remember applying for co-op positions when I was still in university, trying to get experience. And, as soon as I mentioned where I went to school, didn't say anything about, having, needing help relocating or anything like that. They had basically said that they'd only supported local students and then hung up the phone. And I've never forgotten that, because that was a situation that I've never been in before in my life, and I haven't been in since. It was interesting to think that those sorts of biases can come up, right? That, they can play a part in whether or not you get an opportunity versus not. And certainly in the last few months, I've been talking to a lot more filmmakers and also just general entrepreneurs who are people of color who have been through a lot of this kind of thing themselves, where, there's a lack of funding, there's a lack of opportunity. Certainly, there's a lot of like microaggressions, things like, you are walking into the office for a meeting and, instead of they hold the door open for their white colleagues to walk through, but they let the door close on in your face. And they're only doing that to, colleagues who are people of color. And even just things like that, I've heard a lot of stories in regards to how people deal with that. And it's just, well, first of all, to me, it's crazy, because it's, in business and in life, the really interesting thing is that what's been going on has kind of forced me to sort of examine what kind of ally I am. And I've had these conversations with my brother quite a bit, because he lives in Seattle. He's been in the States for over a couple decades. And until he left to move down to the States, he never actually experienced cultural shock, actually felt like a minority, and actually, had to question what kind of ally he is either, because we grew up in a predominantly Cantonese-speaking Chinese community. I graduated with so many Chans and Wongs, like I can't even tell you. And, but at the same time, we always kind of felt like we didn't, as long as I made a conscientious effort to not treat people differently, like still being willing to, like, I would never turn down working with great people, no matter, what their ethnicity is or anything like that. It's like, that should be enough, But then it's like, you look at how we grew up and you look at where we live now. Like for myself, I live in a predominantly Korean community these days. Where my brother lives is, most of the Chinese people in his area don't actually live in his area, right? So it's like a matter of like, how can we become better allies? Like, it's not even just about the way we treat people and that being enough, because I don't think it's enough anymore. It's about actually actively advocating for other people to get more opportunities and helping to support them in the things that they're working on, which are, things that I think before I never actually went out of my way to do. It was just like, as long as I don't treat anybody differently, then, we should be all good, right? Well, it's like, well, no, because society in general still has all of those frameworks and all of those things in place that will keep people down, will keep them in poverty, will, see them passed over for opportunities. Had a very enlightening conversation just a few weeks ago with my fellow co-founder for the audience engagement platform for the Ignite universe, where they talked about, to really truly get somebody, you have to like give up your privilege. You have to actually stop thinking that your perspective is the only one that matters. And that really stuck out to me, because it's like, you can empathize as much as possible, but unless you've actually lived their lives, you don't know with absolute certainty what they've been through because you've never been through it. Like for myself, again, grew up in a predominantly Chinese community. Um, my brother and I have a joke where like, well, no one's more prejudiced towards Asians than other Asians, man. Like we actually have country divides here, you know, like mainland China can't stand people from Hong Kong and vice versa, and they have issues with people from Taiwan, and you know, for my family, being from the village as opposed to the big city, there's stigma there too. Like there's differences there too, even though technically we're all part of the same culture and we speak the same language and we celebrate a lot of the same holidays and everything else, right? So like that's just it. It's like, you know, there are these other dividing lines even among like your own people that you kind of always have to figure out how to navigate, and it's always like a push-pull thing.
Yeah.
You know, always managing kind of like those expectations and figuring out like, you know, how can we do things differently? How can we do things better? How can we continue to advocate for people to get more of these opportunities instead of being part of those frameworks that kind of keep the status quo? Because
Yeah.
I also recognize that, you know, yes, I might be POC and technically I'm a visible minority, but I'm privileged in other ways. Like so many of my friends are still paying off student loans.
Mm-hmm.
I never had to worry about that for school because my family was actually well off enough that they could foot the bill for that. And a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of what's going on is kind of just recognizing, you know, who am I in the spectrum of everything? Where do I land on these things? And how can I grow beyond that to continue to do better and do more and just, you know, educate myself on what like everybody's going through. Because it's like, particularly with the election, I mean, there's people that I know that are like, I can't sleep or do any work until this whole thing's over.
Mm.
And for me, it's easy for me to say, hey, you've done what you can do in terms of what you can control with how you voted, and that's it. It's easy for me to say because I live in an entirely different country.
Yeah.
And whatever happens will affect me, but it affect me in a trickle-down effect as opposed to directly. You know, a lot of the times, like that's the other part of it too, is like going through all this. A lot of people just kind of need that time and space to feel what they need to feel and do what they need to do. And a lot of times, it's not about you trying to come in to fix it for them.
Yeah.
They just kind of need to go through all of that and then, you know, come out the other side, however they're going to come out the other side.
Yeah. Thank you for such an honest answer to that. That was really, really worth hearing and listening to. So thank you for that. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, we're all on this, was it Carl Sagan? I think it's Carl Sagan had that poem, like the pale blue dot. At the end of the day, we're all on a pale blue dot, meaning the Earth from space. You know, we're all on the same planet together, and you might as well. We're finally in, you know, a day and age where it's getting more and more every day to be more like a global society, and it's better to build bridges than to burn them down. So, you know, find what you have in common with your neighbor, not I don't know, the difference, and build a wall up. Like I think it's a lot better to go the other way possible. And I think you're in the storytelling and relationship building business. I think there's no better place to do all the things that you are hoping to achieve. And you know, that's tough for, like you said, your parents or like other, different generation. They grew up, they didn't have that on their radar, or focus on that. They had to focus on other things. But I think, um, I don't know. I think yeah, I know. I don't even know where I'm going with this. It's just change, and like things are different now. And I think you gotta, give space and time to everyone's like just figuring it out. It's weird when you grow up and you get to an age where you start to see flaws in your parents.
Mm-hmm.
That was really weird for me when I'm like, oh, like they don't have their stuff together. They're just figuring it out as best as they can. You can't pick and choose where you're born, who your parents are. You just got to make the best of it. And I think kudos to whoever your business coach is.
Yeah.
I think you got a really great one, and you know, I could see that it's having a really positive effect on your mindset and your goals, and kind of just your general like outlook on life. I love it. I think it's absolutely wonderful. How did you get in touch with your coach? Did you just Google business coach, or how did that come to be? Because that's something that I've actually been interested in and like to um, would like to have as well.
She actually, like, I was posting stuff on Instagram, and she actually liked and commented on some of my stuff.
Hmm.
So then we started talking, and I was telling her all about, how long I've been doing this for, and the fact that, like, literally it wasn't until this year that that I actually invested in myself in regards to, like, spending more money on courses, actually being able to do a barter system with a great web designer to get a new website up, because prior to that, I couldn't afford it. So I had to live like 12 years with the barely, passable one design wise that I built myself. And I was telling her all of this, and I'm just like, I'm tired of like, I love what I do, but it's kind of getting to the point where I'm like, I want to be able to make more money doing it,
Yeah.
you know, because I'm like, I know I have this expertise. I know I'm good at what I do. I know I give like all my clients 110%, and I want it like, it's like if I'm doing the same amount of work anyway, I might as well start making more money doing it, right?
Totally.
And as it turns out, she's actually local. She's on the main line as well, which was a huge surprise. And we started talking about, because she had this program that she was going to be launching, and I was curious about it, and I wanted to know more because it was a hybrid group coaching and like one-on-one coaching. So she'd do group coaching, and then like 2 weeks out of that, she'd also have like one-on-one coaching to really kind of narrow down, what you want to do. And, I talked to her about like, because I've done a lot of like, I've been to like paid for conferences, done free workshops, done seminars, kind of like the whole gamut of stuff before. And I'm like, has there ever been a time where, because she's had business coaches, and I'm like, has there ever been a time where your coach said something and you kind of went, you either disagreed or kind of went, I don't know if that'll actually apply to my business? And she said, what really helped her was changing her perspective.
Mm.
Like if her business coach said something that didn't quite gel, based on the example that she was using, she would tweak the perspective and change it around a little bit and go, how can I make that apply to my business, instead of just outright saying no?
Right. Don't tell me no, tell me how.
Yeah. So, I talked to her about the basis of her program, and when I ended up signing up, and like the things that, we went through 10 weeks, we actually just finished this week, which is crazy because 10 weeks went by like that. But
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been really good because, it's myself and like I think 8 others of us who are all in like varying stages of our businesses, and in different industries as well. Some are coaches, some are service providers, some are just, others are in like, not everybody's marketing. There's other people in operations management and everything else.
Yeah.
And it's like every single week she covers like, it's like, here's your basic business framework that you should be doing in terms of the content you should be sharing, how you get on sales calls with people, how you do market research. And then it was about how do you create a product suite, your highest ticket offer, your mid-range ticket offer, your lowest ticket offer, on how to build out a product suite. So instead of like saying no to somebody outright if they don't fit your highest ticket offer, how can you then move them down to the mid-range or the lowest one so that you can still build a relationship with them? And then figuring out, it's like, what does that product suite look like? What can you build that's in relation to your services and what you offer? And then like building out the strategy on how to promote that part of it as well, was another thing that we talked to. And like the great thing about her is that she hasn't been doing this for very long, but she's never had a client not succeed and not make money. And I mean, she gets so emotional that she's about to cry when I tell her this, but I'm like, you are the first person in years on a business level, like literally everything that you told me makes sense. I haven't disagreed with anything. And I think that that's like really rare in the sense that, because there's a lot of coaches out there that do the same kind of thing that she's doing, but some of them will do, like, they'll be pushier and try to cold sell you. There's others that'll like email you 3 or 4 times a week kind of thing. But with her approach has always been like, I'm always here to help. I'm always here to like have a conversation with you. I'm always here to kind of like help you work through what it is that you're dealing with, even if like, you don't end up being my client right away. Like for her, and what made it really compelling was that when she told me about her program, like she told me about like what they're going to do in terms of the tangible things they're going to focus on, and then also the kind of support she would be providing. And I'm like, you know what, this all makes sense to me. Why not try it? And knowing that at the end of the day, whatever kind of strategies that she gives me, it's up to me to implement them, and like I can control how I choose to do it and when I do it. But let's see if this is going to work. And coming through it, it's like everything makes sense. It's just a matter of like when you implement it and how you implement it. And I think the key there is just really finding a coach that understands where you're coming from, and also understands that whatever kind of strategies they give you, that they're not like, she hates pushy people who always say you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. Like, she's a huge proponent of just like, this is kind of the baseline, of the strategy, or but how you choose to implement it, or like say what you choose to create for your product suite, like that part of it is up to you.
Yeah.
You can kind of pick and choose the pieces that work for you and kind of pull it all together and implement it that way. And I think that's the truly invaluable thing about her, because I was also getting to a point where I'm like, I need that outside perspective of what I'm doing. Like, I've tried a bunch of different things. I've tried to launch a bunch of different things. I've, rejigged a lot of things in terms of like where my focus is and who I want to work with and this, that, and the other. Like, I need somebody to kind of talk to and walk me through how to get to where I want to go. And, it was just fortuitous that she came around at the right time.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it was like this year where I finally, fortunately had the resources to invest.
Yeah.
And kind of wanted to start looking at how do I do things differently. Like, how can I finally start like proving more of that value that I bring to the table, that, so that I can do what I do, but get paid more to do it because I can definitely prove more of that value and do it in a way that feels comfortable to me. Because the other part of it is like, I don't know if you've noticed is, I've been on Instagram, on video and everything else more in the last few weeks than I ever have in my entire life.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, reels are awkward.
Yeah.
They were so awkward when I first started. I'm just like, man, this does not feel natural to me, like at all. Like, what am I supposed to be doing here, right? But it's like, it's kind of, you get into a bit of a rhythm in the sense that even though you still feel a little bit uncomfortable, it's like, I have my script, I know what I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to get on and do it. Doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to put it up there and go like, this is what I'm sharing, this is me. I'm not going to worry, like be fussing around about editing it too much or overproducing it, or it's like, as long as I have the key messaging and um, I can talk about it. It's like the one thing that I know how to do and that I'm actually comfortable doing. So it's just like, might as well do it. Like, turn that camera on and just go for it. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's like, people are actually responding, right? They're actually responding. They're making comments. They're asking questions. They're, asking for my expertise on things. Like this morning, I just did a live video because of a great conversation I had yesterday with an author who's like, how do I build a strategy when I don't have anything to publicize yet? And I said to her, and I repeated it in the video, I'm like, the whole point of building one is to make sure that you're ready, that you have that ready to go when you're ready to go. And it doesn't have to be like, maybe you're not going to have the story ideas part firmed up yet. Hey, that's fine. Work on building your media kit, working on building your media list, work on, practicing answering interview questions in front of the mirror, stuff like that. Because it's like, when you're ready to go, then that stuff's going to go with you no matter how many campaigns you do. It's like, once you build that kit, it's always going to be there. All you need to do is update it. Once you have that list handy, it's always going to be there. All you need to do is update it. And once you get comfortable answering those questions, it's not going to matter how many interviews you do. You're going to like feel less nervous doing it. So the whole point of it is like to spend that time and energy building that stuff ahead of time, so that when you do have something to release, it's like, oh crap, my film's coming out in like 3 weeks. You don't have to go, crap, I've got nothing ready. Right? Like, that's the whole point, is like spending the time and the energy to build all of this stuff before you have something to promote, right? Because if you wait until something's, like the deadline comes up, then it's too late. Then you're already behind the 8 ball, and then you're trying to always catch up.
Yeah, and if you get overwhelmed too, I think, I text my buddy who he's been wanting to start a business for a while, and I text him one thing, and that's it. And it's just basically like, what's the one thing, going back to what we were talking about earlier, what's the one thing? If you only get one thing done today, then at least it's that one thing. But
yeah,
just focus on one thing at a time until completion if you can, and get that done, and then go on to the next thing. I think it's if you just focus on one thing at a time, you'll not worry about all the things that you need to do, or it's getting out of your head again and just being like, okay, I want to do one thing today, and get after it and do that one thing, and then move on to the next thing.
Exactly. Like, it's not enough people give themselves the time and space to do that. And they kind of get so caught up in the details and everything, and and they get flustered and everything else, and it's just like, just focus on that one thing. Because there's so many people have like great knowledge about why they do what they do, what they do, and things like that I'm like, it's all up here. You just need to get it out.
Yeah.
on paper, in a video, however you choose to do it. You just need to get it out.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of, I think, what it comes down to is like you can get so bogged down by the details when it's like,
In your head.
yeah, and it's like, well, what's the big picture, right?
Yeah.
And it's like if you have that big picture, it's like what's the first step that you can take to moving towards that, like accomplishing that big picture.
Yeah.
Really is I think the healthiest way to look at it, because it's like, um, nobody has a secret formula, as you know. There's no such thing as a secret sauce when it comes to marketing. Luck and timing does play a part into it,
Hmm.
but all the luck and all the good timing in the world is not going to help you if you don't have a strategy at
Hmm.
the end of the day.
Yeah, totally. Well, this has been so much fun, and I think we could probably talk to hours, but
Yeah,
we covered a lot of ground, and I'd love to chat with you a little bit more off recording, just about the business coach, because I think that's something
sure.
that's definitely I just want to dig into that a little bit more. But thank you so much for taking the time and just telling everyone a little bit about yourself and everything that's going on with you. We covered a lot of ground. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Website, social media, all that fun stuff.
Well, I'm pretty active on Instagram, as I mentioned, so they can always find me at Lilian Copywriter PR on Instagram.
Mm.
My website is in retrospect writingservices.com, or you can find me on Twitter as well at lsu23, talking about everything related to film, comic books, music, and other nerd pursuits. If you want to kind of talk to me about that stuff, I'm always there as well. And I'm always responsive on, send me a message on Instagram, send me a message through my website, and I'll always get back to you, and happy to chat.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much again for the time, and I'll put the links of that in the description of the episode. So thanks again, Lily, and hopefully we can do a round two sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Looking forward to it.